I've been playing guitar, writing songs, and performing for more than 25 years now. When I was a teenager, first learning to play guitar, I was obsessed with it. I went to an arts high school in Chicago where I studied music, although my family and I lived over an hour away. I would get up every morning at 5 a.m. to get ready to go to school, commute to school with my mom in Chicago traffic, get to school, and take classes, and then commute back home, normally arriving around 5 p.m. Then I would eat dinner, do my homework, and then practice guitar for at least 2 hours a night. This was my routine for 3 out of 4 years I went to high school, and I loved it. Even though the days were long and I was exhausted by the end of the day, I was happy. I was happy because I was spending time learning and practicing something I was really passionate about, music. After high school, I went to Berklee College of Music, where my schedule was equally as intense, apart from the getting up at 5 a.m. part, since I was living on campus. Berklee was amazing because, in addition to being a great school with a great staff, I was also surrounded and living with like-minded people. One of my favorite memories is coming back to my dorm room at the end of the day where a jam session with my roommate and several other various musicians would normally take place. I made more progress more quickly during my time at Berklee than perhaps any other period in my life. It was impossible to not improve. I was living and breathing music, and I loved it. After Berklee, I went back to Chicago and formed my first serious band, Urb, spelled U-R-B, that was together about 3 years. Our lead singer, Josh Jones, has gone on to achieve considerable success as one half of the country duo Steel Magnolia, and most recently as a solo artist. This period was another great period of growth. We were playing a lot of shows and practicing a lot. I loved playing live with this band, and although we were actually pretty bad when we first started, we progressed a lot, and by the end of our time together, we sounded great and were putting on solid shows. Right around the time we started getting some momentum going in Chicago, for a variety of reasons, we broke up. Since that time, I've performed in several different bands and as a solo artist. I've written several albums worth of material on my own and have done pretty well licensing a lot of my music in TV, movie theaters, new media, and other outlets. I still love music as much as I did when I was a teenager, first learning to play Smoke on the Water and Iron Man. I still get the same chills up and down my spine when I write a song and bring it to life. I still have the same sense of curiosity about exploring and discovering new music as I always have. But I have to be honest, there are periods where this sense of inspiration and excitement about music waxes and wanes. I think when you've been doing anything for 2 decades or more, it's to be expected. One of the realities of life is that most things we're exposed to over long periods of time will lose some of their luster, whether it's a relationship that fills you with joy and excitement in the beginning that gradually gives way to feelings of boredom and normalcy, or a new hobby that gets us pumped and excited that eventually we lose interest with. It's hard to sustain passion for things over long periods of time. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as adaptation. We tend to adapt to new experiences and eventually return to a sort of baseline emotion. The challenge when it comes to music, and in particular pursuing a career in music, is that it's probably going to take you a very sustained period of time to realize any substantial sort of success. In my experience, 10 years is pretty common, but of course it might take you much longer. So how do you sustain your excitement over the years when there's so much uncertainty about whether or when you'll achieve your goals? While at the same time, you're dealing with the challenges of day-to-day life and survival, and the passage of time itself is threatening to erode the passion that inspired you to pursue music in the first place. What's a musician to do? Well, during this video, I'm going to give you some ideas and share some things that have worked for me and allowed me to keep going over the years without throwing in the towel and just giving up. Number 1, stay focused on why you're making music. Think about and reflect on what drew you to making music in the first place. Was it just to make a lot of money? Was it to become famous? Was it to move people? Was it because you simply love playing music? Do you still have the same goals now? For me, the fundamental reason I've always wanted to play music was to bring joy to other people's lives. In the same way I feel great when I listen to music that I love, I want to bring these emotions to other people through the music I create. Without sounding overly corny and lofty, I want to make the world a better place in my own small way. For me, when I stay focused on this goal, it makes it much easier to deal with the frustrations and setbacks that come along with pursuing a career in music. The world will present many obstacles on your path, but if you believe what you're doing is noble and good, it's much easier to overcome and find ways around the obstacles that present themselves. If you're just making music to become rich and famous, it's likely that you'll just give up after a few years unless you actually become rich and famous, which could happen, but will probably take a little longer than this to achieve. Number 2, get out of your comfort zone. In other words, evolve. One of the things that's so exciting about learning music when you're new to it is that it's new. The great thing about music is that this process of learning and expansion never has to end. You'll never master music, and that's a good thing. I think what often happens, though, is that musicians reach a level of proficiency and then they stop. It's hard to remain excited about music if you're playing the same 3 or 4 chords over and over again. I don't know how Jimmy Buffett does it. So resist the urge to rest on your laurels and get lazy. Keep learning. It's hard to get bored when there's always something new to learn. Number 3, make sure your basic needs are met. It's really hard to be creative and sustain excitement when you're worried about how to pay your rent and buy food. You might be able to maintain your happiness and inspiration for a couple years if you're young and really hungry, but after time, this lifestyle gets old for most people. Whether you teach music or do something totally unrelated to music just to pay the bills, it's important to get yourself in a position where your basic needs are met so that you can focus on what you love, making music. The challenge is to find a way to make enough money that leaves you with enough time and energy to keep pursuing music. What happens to a lot of musicians is that they struggle to make money from music initially, and so they end up doing something else to make ends meet, and over time music gets pushed further and further back. It's important to make sure your needs are met, but you also need to have a plan that you're working towards to make money from music, if that's your goal. Check out my other video, How to Make $60,000 a Year Working 25 Hours a Week as a Musician, for ideas on how to create a sustainable income as a musician. I'll link to that video below this video. Number 4, create momentum. It's easy to reach plateaus as you're pursuing a music career, and if you're not careful, it's very easy to lose momentum and drive. I think an ideal path should be a continual cycle of peaks and valleys with a trend upwards over time. So how do you accomplish this? Well, I think part of it is having very specific goals that you're working towards, that you're actively creating momentum towards. For example, taking a sustained and consistent approach over 90 or 180 days like I do in my music licensing challenges. It's very hard to not move forward if you're working towards something consistently for this long of a period of time. But on the flip side, if you're complacent and not really taking action, it's really, really easy to start losing momentum and sliding backwards. Momentum rarely happens by accident. You really need to actively cultivate it. Number 5, take breaks. Finally, if you're really not feeling inspired and excited about music, take a break every once in a while. In the same way that absence makes the heart grow fonder in romantic relationships, I think the same thing is true of our passions and goals. It's easy to get burnout at almost anything if we're pursuing it for a long period of time. So as much as we need periods of consistent growth and momentum, we also need periods where we focus on other things. Maybe take a couple weeks to vacation or just relax and catch up on reading or other interests you have. I find that when I do this from time to time, I usually return to music more inspired and rejuvenated than ever. So there's a few of my ideas on maintaining motivation over the long haul. If you're pursuing music as a career, it's almost inevitable that you'll reach plateaus in periods where you don't feel like you're progressing. It's to be expected, I think. So don't let it get you down when you have these periods. Instead, be proactive and do what you need to do to keep progressing and moving forward. It's hard not to be motivated when you're making measurable progress.